Can you believe it? Imagine a single, terse letter, dispatched in the year 367 AD, from the pen of a man whose authority was rapidly consolidating. This wasn't merely a suggestion or a recommendation. It was an absolute decree, a command, so potent, so chillingly effective, that it triggered the systematic incineration of hundreds of sacred texts. In a brutal act of historical vandalism, these invaluable documents were not just destroyed, but effectively erased from the collective memory of humanity for an astonishing 1600 years. This devastation wasn't the chaotic byproduct of war, nor the unpredictable, untamed fury of a natural disaster. No, this was a meticulously calculated, cold-blooded, and entirely intentional command, radiating from the very highest echelons of an emerging power structure, designed to shape the future of belief itself. What was buried, or rather, what was sought to be annihilated, was far more profound than fragile ancient scrolls. These were not simply historical curiosities. They held within their pages teachings capable of fundamentally reorienting how humanity perceived the figure of Jesus, and even more critically, how we understood our own inherent nature and potential. It was a message of such profoundly transformative power, so inherently empowering to the individual spirit, that it undeniably struck terror into the very heart of an institution then striving for singular control, compelling it to seek their permanent, absolute erasure. And yet, in a twist of fate so improbable it verges on the miraculous, these suppressed truths, these lost narratives, somehow resurfaced. Unearthed from the parched, sun-baked sands of the Egyptian desert in 1945 by an unassuming local farmer, their rediscovery didn't just ripple through the academic world, it sent seismic shockwaves. It shattered centuries of entrenched theological and historical thought, forcing scholars and believers alike to confront uncomfortable, deeply challenging questions about the narratives we had come to accept as absolute, immutable truths. Today, we embark on a journey to gently peel back the intricate layers of this extraordinary, deeply resonant story. Our purpose here isn't to ignite fierce historical debates or to provoke theological conflict. Instead, it is an invitation for a deep, collective contemplation on what truly matters in life, on the nature of truth itself. This reflection holds a particular, poignant resonance for those of us who have reached a stage in life where we possess the invaluable perspective to look back, to examine our foundations, and to discern, with newfound clarity, what is truly essential. The year was indeed 367. A letter, terse in its language, but absolute in its command, was dispatched across the fledgling Christian world, and with just a few devastating lines of written instruction, hundreds upon hundreds of sacred texts, once vibrant sources of diverse spiritual understanding, were ruthlessly consigned to the flames, vanishing from the annals of recorded history for a protracted period of 16 silent centuries. We often operate under the convenient yet flawed assumption that history is simply built upon what survives, a narrative of endurance. Yet, sometimes, it is precisely what has been meticulously removed, deliberately suppressed, or systematically silenced that holds the greatest power to shape, define, and even distort entire civilizations and their understanding of themselves. A formidable bishop named Athanasius of Alexandria, a pivotal and fiercely influential figure in the early Christian church, took it upon himself to curate, with an iron fist, the very fabric of nascent Christian belief. He compiled what was to become a definitive, exclusive list of 27 texts, carefully deemed permissible indeed, mandatory for reading within the communities of the faithful. His subsequent instruction regarding all other texts was disturbingly unambiguous, absolute in its finality. All times other remaining texts were to be destroyed. There was no room, no conceivable space for discussion, no opportunity for theological discourse, no avenue for dissent. There was only one chilling, unyielding command: burn them. But wait, a small, extraordinarily courageous cadre of individuals, facing incomprehensible risk, dared to defy that chilling, genocidal mandate. In the blistering, sun-baked expanse of the Egyptian desert, not far from the region now globally recognized as Nag Hammadi, these rebels, these quiet, clandestine guardians of forbidden knowledge, undertook a desperate act of preservation, with pounding hearts undoubtedly quickened by the twin rhythms of fear of discovery, fear of brutal, agonizing reprisal. They carefully interred the prescribed texts within a crudely fashioned clay jar, sweat beaded, and stung their eyes under the relentless, unforgiving desert sun. Yet, intertwined with that gnawing fear was a flickering, tenacious spark of hope. They could not possibly have known if anyone would ever find these hidden treasures again, or if their efforts would be utterly in vain. They simply held a profound, unshakable conviction. If these sacred words vanished completely, a vital fragment of truth, a crucial dimension of human understanding, would be irrevocably lost forever to humanity. And so, for 1600 silent, watchful years, the desert, in its vast, indifferent wisdom, kept its precious secret. What inherent power, what radical, perhaps even dangerous, insight resided within those forbidden texts that compelled a powerful, burgeoning institution to fear them so profoundly, so existentially, as to order their total, merciless annihilation? What truth could inspire such terror in the hearts of those who sought to control the minds and souls of millions? Then, in 1945, the desert finally yielded its secret. A local farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Samman was engaged in the mundane, yet essential, task of digging for times, sabak, times, a rich, nitrogenous soil used as fertilizer when his hoe struck something unyielding and solid beneath the shifting sand. His hands, calloused from years of toil, trembled not just from exertion, but as he brushed away layers of ancient dust and grit, his heart was caught between the superstitious dread of local folklore concerning mischievous times, jinn times, and the irrepressible, universal tug of human curiosity. Inside the crudely sealed jar, he found not one, but 52 ancient manuscripts. These were no myths, no mere hypotheses or theological abstractions. These were tangible, authenticated documents, now meticulously preserved, studied, and revered in some of the world's most prestigious academic archives and museums. But the true revolutionary significance lay not merely in the sheer quantity of these miraculously rediscovered texts. It was the profoundly challenging, indeed mind-altering, content contained within their fragile papyrus pages that truly ignited a re-evaluation of history and belief. Within these ancient writings, the figure of Jesus was often portrayed in a startlingly different light. He did not, for instance, demand belief in him in the conventional, dogmatic way we have often been taught to understand. He did not speak of the forgiveness of sins in the familiar, transactional sense, where salvation is mediated by external acts or rituals. He was not depicted as establishing a rigid, hierarchical religion with an exclusive priesthood. Instead, there were passages that cautioned intensely against the worshipping of a deceased figure, warning that people would mistakenly believe such external devotion purified them, when in reality, it would entrap them in a sophisticated spiritual snare, diverting them from their own inner truth. Why would a message emphasizing such profound introspection, such radical personal liberation, and direct self-discovery be so deliberately and fiercely excised from the mainstream currents of history, consigned to oblivion? What made it so dangerous to the established order? During the dynamic first 2 centuries of Christianity, what we now label orthodoxy, meaning right belief, and gnosis, or Gnosticism, derived from the Greek word for knowledge, were not two distinct, hermetically sealed worlds. Far from it. They coexisted, often in vibrant and sometimes violently intellectual collision. Adherents of both streams, in many instances, read many of the same foundational texts. They spoke of the same central figure, Jesus, yet, their interpretations diverged radically and profoundly along two entirely different, ultimately irreconcilable paths. One path asserted that salvation, spiritual understanding, and ultimately eternal life came through unquestioning faith and absolute obedience to a defined, externally imposed doctrine, mediated by a growing ecclesiastical structure. The other path, however, declared something far more audacious, that ultimate truth could not simply be given to you as a dogma to be believed. It was something you had to actively, internally, painstakingly discover for yourself through a process of spiritual awakening and self-knowledge. But if that second proposition were indeed true, if ultimate truth were an internal discovery, then the entire function of an intermediary, be it a priest, a church, or a set of prescribed rituals, would utterly vanish, rendered instantly redundant. If human beings possessed the inherent, divinely bestowed capacity to know the divine directly, intimately, without the need for any mediating system, any hierarchical institution, or any external authority, then the entire, burgeoning structure of institutional power would become superfluous, rendered entirely obsolete. No one, absolutely no one, would stand between the individual soul and the sacred. And if there were no longer any intermediaries, no gatekeepers, no designated interpreters of divine will, who then would control belief itself? The very foundation of an institutionalized religion would crumble. This, precisely, is the juncture where everything began to become immeasurably dangerous, not because of any inherently mystical or esoteric content within the texts themselves, which could be easily dismissed as mere heresy, but because of the very real, very tangible, and very immediate implications for power, control, and the maintenance of social order within the rapidly expanding Roman Empire. These texts did not merely offer alternative teachings or different theological perspectives. They presented a fundamentally different understanding of the human being itself. They suggested that what truly mattered was not holding the correct external belief or adhering to a particular dogma, but rather the profound internal act of recognizing who you truly are at your deepest, most essential core. This was not about becoming something new, adopting a new identity. It was about realizing what has always been, an inherent, divine spark within. Several sayings found in these ancient texts directly challenged prevailing popular understandings and expectations. For instance, the declaration, "The kingdom is not in the sky, nor beneath the sea, but it is within and outside you." What could this possibly mean? It implies not a distant, ethereal place one might hope to reach after physical death, but a profound state of consciousness, a tangible spiritual reality one could recognize and inhabit right here, right now, in this very life. It shifted the focus from a future reward to an immediate, present awakening. If such a profound, liberating truth were indeed readily accessible, an inherent human potential, what could have possibly prevented humanity from perceiving it, from living it, for thousands upon thousands of years? Part of the answer, perhaps the most crucial part, lies in the very process of human formation, shaped from the earliest, most impressionable stages of life. Our beliefs, our fears, our deepest aspirations, our collective cultural narratives, all coalesce to forge a thick, often impenetrable, layer of identity that causes us to conflate who we truly are with the roles we play, the labels we accept, the stories we are told. And once we become so deeply, so unconsciously identified with these external constructs, these societal expectations, we cease to question. We stop looking beyond the programmed reality. And when you cease to question with genuine curiosity and courage, you also cease to truly search for self, for truth, for deeper meaning. The ancient texts describe this pervasive condition as a state of profound forgetting, not a mere loss of memory for facts or names, but an amnesia concerning one's own essential nature, one's true, unconditioned self. In such a state, individuals might live an entire lifetime operating within a pre-programmed framework, a pre-designed existence, never realizing they are enacting a script written by others, for others. And if someone were to suddenly appear and gently, yet unequivocally, remind you that you are times, not times that programmed framework, that you are something far vaster, far more profound, far more free, would you embrace that startling truth? Or would you instinctively, fiercely resist it, clinging to the familiar comfort of your constructed identity? History, regrettably, suggests the answer is often resistance. Ideas that threaten to dismantle foundational paradigms, to upend cherished beliefs, are frequently deemed dangerous, not necessarily because they are inherently false, but precisely because they necessitate a radical, often uncomfortable, shift in how people perceive themselves and their place in the world. Change, even positive change, can be terrifying. And there is nothing, perhaps, more frightening to systems of control, be they political, economic, or religious, than a human being no longer driven by the pervasive, manipulating power of fear. A truly fearless individual is truly uncontrollable. Consider some of the most radical reinterpretations found within these rediscovered texts. In some, the figure of Judas Iscariot is not portrayed as the ultimate betrayer, the villain of the sacred drama, but rather as the sole individual who truly understood what needed to transpire for the divine plan to unfold. This is a complete inversion of the familiar narrative, a radical reimagining that doesn't just alter a single detail, but profoundly reshapes the entire interpretation of the central story of Christianity, challenging the very notion of sin and sacrifice. If the stories you've believed your entire life, upon which your worldview is built, can be told in such profoundly different ways, with utterly opposing meanings, what then remains absolutely certain? What bedrock of belief can you still trust implicitly? There are also texts that depict Mary Magdalene not as a peripheral, penitent, or even fallen figure, but as the one who asked the most incisive questions, the one who possessed the deepest spiritual understanding among the disciples, often serving as a key interpreter of Jesus' teachings. Yet, official history, the version painstakingly codified into orthodoxy, deliberately chose a strikingly different, far lesser portrayal, diminishing her role and influence. And when one version of a narrative is chosen and promulgated with institutional force, all other competing versions inevitably fade, disappear, or are actively suppressed from the collective consciousness, as if they never existed. This, then, is not ultimately a story about what is definitively right or wrong in a theological sense. This is a profound, deeply human narrative about choices. The pivotal choices made about what would be preserved for future generations and what would be systematically, irrevocably eliminated. It is a story about the power of selection. And what remains striking, what stands out with stark clarity, is the consistent commonality among the texts that were deemed heretical and discarded. They invariably empowered the individual directly, not through intermediaries, not through a rigid system of belief or ritual, but through an internal, personal, unmediated connection to truth, to the divine within. What might a society look like? What magnificent flourishing could it achieve if it were built upon self-aware, self-realized individuals who have discovered their own inner wisdom, rather than those who are dependent upon external authority for their spiritual understanding and moral guidance? Perhaps that was precisely the question that those who ordered the destruction understood all too well. Their deepest fear was not of the texts themselves, as mere papyrus and ink, but of the transformative, liberating consequences of human beings reading, truly comprehending, and living by the radical insights contained within them. They feared the unleashed potential of a self-aware populace. An idea, it turns out, can be buried, can be suppressed with immense force, but it cannot be entirely extinguished. It merely lies dormant. Those ancient manuscripts lay silent beneath the sands for 1,600 long, unyielding years, unread, unmentioned, unacknowledged by official history. But they were never truly gone. They were merely waiting And when they finally re-emerged, dusty yet vibrant, they reignited a fundamental, primal question that history had so meticulously and violently attempted to suppress. Who are you, at your core, if you strip away all that you have been taught to believe, all the labels, all the expectations, all the inherited narratives? As I reflect upon the extraordinary journey of these texts, from their clandestine burial to their miraculous rediscovery, I am deeply moved by the quiet, almost unimaginable courage of those ordinary individuals who chose to protect a potential truth over their own immediate safety, perhaps even their very lives. They were fathers, brothers, friends, within a small, isolated community in the unforgiving desert. They understood the immense, terrifying risks they were taking, yet they acted out of a profound conviction that future generations, however distant, deserved a fuller, richer understanding of their spiritual heritage. This, perhaps, is the most profound lesson I wish to impart to all of you today, those who have navigated life's myriad ups and downs, those who are parents and grandparents guiding the next generation. In our contemporary world, saturated with an overwhelming deluge of information, where opinions masquerade as facts and narratives compete for our attention, it is all too easy to passively accept what is presented to us without ever daring to question, to probe, to seek deeper. But these ancient texts serve as a powerful, timeless reminder that authentic truth often resides not in the comfortable repetition of received wisdom, but in the challenging, sometimes arduous, journey of self-discovery. If you have lived for decades, meticulously building your worldview on beliefs passed down from your family, your church, your society, your culture, have you ever paused for a single, incandescent moment and dared to ask yourself, with brutal honesty, am I truly living my own authentic life, or merely enacting a version of existence that others have desired or expected of me? That, precisely, is the liberating power that these ancient pages, these buried whispers, offer. They do not promise an easy path, no instant enlightenment. Instead, they simply throw open a door, inviting you, daring you to look deep within yourself, to confront your own inherited assumptions, and to embark on your own unique quest for self-realization. And after all this time, after all the centuries of suppression and rediscovery, that profound question remains as potent, as urgent, and as relevant for any generation, for any individual willing to ask it. Perhaps the most valuable, enduring legacy of these ancient texts is not even their specific content, however revolutionary. It is, rather, the powerful, visceral human reaction they provoked, both in their initial suppression and their later rediscovery. When an idea compels an entire, formidable system to act so drastically, so violently, to erase it, to pretend it never existed, that, in itself, speaks volumes. It signifies that idea possesses not just power, but times, immense times power. Not the power of control, or of coercion, or of domination, but the incandescent, untamed power of liberation. Those quiet, courageous souls who interred that humble clay jar all those centuries ago may not have fully grasped the profound, long-term implications of their seemingly small actions for the distant future. But they understood one simple, fundamental truth with unwavering clarity. Some questions, some possibilities, some dimensions of human experience must never, ever be allowed to vanish. And if the answers you seek, the deepest truths of your existence, are not ultimately to be found externally, in doctrines or institutions or the opinions of others, then why, I ask, are you still searching there? Why not turn inward? This is the enduring legacy we, as parents and grandparents, must strive to pass on to our children and grandchildren. Let us teach them to ask audacious, uncomfortable questions, to listen intently to the quiet, often overlooked whisperings of their inner voice, to understand that life is not about blind obedience to external dictates, but about the lifelong journey of recognizing and embodying their own true nature. When the next generation learns this profound lesson, when they embrace this inner quest, We will not only protect history, we will unlock a future where every human being can genuinely be free, truly sovereign in their own spirit. And perhaps, truly, that was the most fervent, audacious hope of those courageous, nameless souls who dared to bury that clay jar in the desert sand so long ago. I believe that at our stage in life, having weathered so many storms, having accumulated so much experience, this is the most beautiful and opportune moment to pause, to reflect, and to courageously ask these grand, existential questions of ourselves. Life is no longer about relentlessly pursuing the expectations of others, about fulfilling roles dictated by society. This is the precious, sacred time when we are truly given permission to return to ourselves, to our authentic core. If today's story has resonated deep within your heart, if it has stirred something within your soul, please consider sharing it with your children or grandchildren. Perhaps someone in your own family, grappling with their own journey, needs to hear these potent reminders of the power of self-discovery. And if you wish to continue exploring more profound historical narratives and invaluable lessons for our inner journeys with me, please hit the follow button and turn on notifications. Together, we will delve even deeper into the mysteries that shape us.